And we're live.
We're live.
We're live.
We should have a bumper or something. There's no.
I know. Don't have our theme song yet, so we don't have a soundboard or anything. So
That's true. When we actually get it, I would like to be like just one giant harmonica solo, like a 4-minute harmonica solo.
I was expecting
directly like 60 minutes and have no theme music at all.
I was actually expecting you to just play it live. Like, I don't know. Do you have any musical talent? Just show up to every event.
No.
All right.
So we should tell everybody what this is. Welcome to the first ever AppBuilder Office Hours. This is a live broadcast where we're going to talk about all things hybrid development, really.
Yep.
So yeah, thanks for joining us. Obviously, you know, there's thousands of people live right now. I mean, I'm looking. It says there's 27,493 people watching. That's amazing. We're honored. Yeah, blown away. TJ, what's on the agenda for the first AppBuilder Office Hours?
So we have two topics today. We are going to talk a little bit about iOS 8. And then we are going to talk about a new Cordova plugin for native page transitions. So should be pretty cool. And I thought we'd get started with iOS 8, just a brief discussion. And I remember when iOS 8 first dropped, Burke, your first reaction being that the only change you noticed was the health app showing up on the home screen.
Yeah, I think my actual tweet was that I thought that they just incremented the build number and then hit build.
Yeah, and I think that's because iOS 7 was such a massive thing, like just basically reinvented the OS, that iOS 8 felt just, from a visual perspective, kind of underwhelming.
Yeah, it seems to be that there's a ton of features in this release that are completely hidden but are really, really cool. Like the fact that Siri can now identify songs, and you used to need like SoundHound for that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can ask her what song is this, and she'll tell you.
And she just listens to your audio and figures it out?
Yeah. Another one is the fact that you can actually use Safari and scan in a credit card to fill out a form that has a credit card form on it.
Oh, wow.
I know, that's crazy.
There's interactive notifications, which I've yet to really see an app use. So the thing where you get a notification on iOS and you can do things like say, do you want to accept or decline this? And you can program in your notification to do that. I don't think I've seen a third-party app do that yet. I've seen the Messages app where you can do things like respond in line from the notification, which is kind of slick. I don't think I've seen any third-party apps use the customizable notifications yet.
I haven't either, and there's supposed to be notification screen widgets, and I don't really see any of those. I think I found like a weather widget, and I think that was about it. Other than that, nobody seems to be using it, or I don't know.
The SportsCenter iOS app has one.
I was just going to say, I think the health industry is pushing out these kind of apps because since we have all this new stuff with the health kit, that we have more, access to like interactive notifications for any kind of fitness apps.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. And of course, the biggest thing, I guess, is what do they call that? The handoff, or
yeah, the Yosemite tie-ins, basically.
Yeah, I don't. What's the official word for that? And it's not Confluence. That's Microsoft's. Like, that's different. I forget what it's called. I think it's just called Handoff. But thanks to the person who stole my phone 3 weeks ago, appreciate that. Until my other one gets here, I have Yosemite, but I haven't had a chance to actually try it out. Does it work well?
Are you talking about Find My iPhone?
No, just the.
No.
I was just going to say the fact that you can basically send text messages from your Mac, you can answer phone calls from your Mac, and what's funny is I've seen it actually works fine. Like I see them pop up on my Mac, but I haven't actually used it really yet because it's just weird to me that I find my Mac will say you have a phone call, but I don't want to answer it from my computer because that just seems very strange. So I end up just picking up my phone and answering the phone call.
Yeah.
So
You find that it rings at the same time, or does the phone start ringing like 10 seconds before the computer actually? Because when I had the beta, that's the way it was for me. And by the time it showed up on my computer, you like enough time to see it, and then by the time you got there, the phone it was too late. You already missed the call.
yeah, for me, there's certainly a delay. The phone rings first. I'm trying to think, but it's not 10 seconds anymore. It's more like 2 seconds. So it's noticeable to me, but it's not that bad. So I think the other thing, and at least from an API perspective, from an app development perspective, I know that there was changes to the way icons work, basically everybody's favorite thing to do when developing an app, and then also the like app preview within the iOS App Store. And so, Jen, I wanted to ask you about that because you've told me you had a very fun experience dealing with that.
Well, I think as iOS 8 was being delivered, they also are getting ready to deliver Yosemite, and also they're redoing, at least halfway's redoing iTunes Connect. So anyone who's releasing commercial apps, basically lives in iTunes Connect for hours at a time while you're trying to release this app, and the experience was dramatically different from the old iTunes Connect to the new iTunes Connect. And they still haven't migrated some parts of the old iTunes Connect into the new experience. So if you try to create, I believe, promo codes, I was just looking at this last night, it's still the old interface, and then you flip back to the new interface. But the way the whole thing is laid out is very, very different. So that took some getting used to. But the thing that got everyone excited was this concept that finally, just like in Google Play, you can create an app trailer, a 30-second app preview video for your app, and that's fabulous. Everybody's very excited. And they gave us some parameters around that of the content that we can show, but one of the tricky bits was that you have to be on Yosemite and you have to be recording it on Safari. So a lot of us were not quite yet migrated to Yosemite, but trying to, post in an app trailer, and it just became really challenging. The whole history of partitioning, your Mac to get the beta of Yosemite so that you could post in the video. It was very, very time consuming, but now that Yosemite's been released, you're not going to have these issues. You can go ahead, at least if you're on Safari, you can go ahead and record your app trailer. And the interesting thing, what's really exciting, is that you can record using iTunes straight from your device. You just hook it into your computer, and then you can manipulate your app, and then the recording will happen right on your machine, and that's a huge time saver.
And that's within iTunes directly?
Yeah, I just want to verify what I'm saying, but I believe that is true.
Is that the new QuickTime thing where you can record?
I knew I was making a mistake there. QuickTime, yes.
I'm confused between the two of them.
Sorry.
QuickTime is one of those things that you never use until you use it, and then you're like, oh yeah, I totally remember this from like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's QuickTime.
Yes. QuickTime. Sorry about that. The only caveat being, if you have any fancy plugins, like if you're trying to show that you can take a picture and decorate it, it crashes QuickTime.
So, really?
It's really, unfortunately.
QuickTime hasn't changed much in a decade.
Yeah, it just crashes and burns. So I'm kind of hoping, I know there are places in Apple where you can submit bug reports, but I haven't really had time to mess with it. But that is a problem. So if you're just doing a very basic, like a game or a business app, and you want to record in QuickTime, it works really nicely. That's a great new feature.
Have you seen many apps that actually use the video previews? You have?
Yeah, it's a thing, and a lot of the people are having it done professionally. A lot of people are having professional voiceovers and licensing music specifically for these trailers. There's a lot of copyright issues around it, but there's a place in iTunes that you can see featured trailers. You can actually look at people's special videos. So Apple's really promoting this. The trick is, and I don't have any numbers around this, I wonder if it hurts downloads, because the mystery of your app is gone. You're showing everything. Everything's out for the open, and
that's interesting.
I'm just not sure. I thought originally, I jumped on it, I'm like, this is great, people are going to be very excited, they can see things up front. And that may be true for games, but I just wonder about the downloads, how it's going to impact downloads.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I wonder if it's going to be one of those things where, remember when like the only way to rate an app was when you deleted it? Do you guys remember? Just setting people up for failure when it comes to reviews. So maybe it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it's. I think that what's going to happen is that you have to almost have it done professionally, and that's a budget item. So the indies are going to be hurting with this stuff. If it's done kind of just tacky, like the one I did with no sound, I think it might hurt your downloads. But if you've got something really, nicely displayed and really well done, then it might attract the viewer.
It's funny. I wonder if someone's going to do some analytics around this, like since it's so new, to figure out that sort of thing. I mean, it's a hard thing to do to get data on whether that's going to work or not.
I think you'd have to release maybe. It'd be interesting to release a paid app, like your paid app, which has full features without the video, and then do a free version of the app, a little bit pared down, but with a beautiful video, and see how the downloads compare. That would be interesting.
I think this is also a good place for us to point out that we're actually talking about doing an app trailer for one lucky customer, somebody that's using AppBuilder. So if you want to get your name in the running for that, you should hit us up. You can either hit up the comment thread or you can email Jen directly, jen.looper@telerik.com.
Yay.
And we'll get your name in the running for that. But yeah, we're gonna bestow a nice professional app trailer on somebody here pretty shortly. So
Yeah,
that's exciting.
That's a value added, because let me tell you from experience, they're a pain to make.
And
there's some sites that will do it for you, right? Like there's sites where you can go in and.
Yes, definitely. You just have to be aware of copyright issues, I think, and you have to be. You don't want to put. There are parameters like Apple, like I said, that Apple is insisting that you do. You don't put your brand out there. You don't put like your logo in there. If you have a voiceover, it almost has to be professional. And you need to think about, if your app is localized, how you're going to handle the voice. So a lot of interesting branding things to consider.
I hadn't even thought about that.
They don't have localized app videos yet. But when that happens, oh boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Geez, that could get out of hand in a hurry.
It's just going to get expensive. And then the other thing that happened with the release of the new iTunes and also iOS 8 and iPhone 6 and 6 supersize is that we're allowed to post in more screenshots. I think I counted the minimum would be 25 for a decent submission. So
the minimum?
Something like that, yeah, because you want to have at least 3 per platform. So you have your iPhone 4, iPhone 5, iPhone 6 Max, and iPad.
Oh, geez.
And that, for me, is taking about 4 or 5 hours to do those.
That's insane.
But if you go to my GitHub, I have a template that you can use. So.
Somebody asked in the Q&A about the sites that will do the trailers for you. Or can we list those out, like in the show notes afterwards or something?
Yes.
Yeah, and this is a good time to mention that this event is called the Office Hours. We would love to have participation from those of you viewing. So built into Hangouts, there is a Q&A feature. There is some chat as well, so if you ask any questions, if you want anything about the topics we're talking about or anything just about AppBuilder in general, feel free to ask, and we'll cover them live on the air.
All right, let's talk about WKWebView. Can we do that?
Yep. So how about should I give a little bit of background first for anybody not familiar with the topic? So
yes.
Yeah. So when you're talking hybrid apps, for anybody who's kind of not familiar with the basics, the way a hybrid app works, or a Cordova app, a PhoneGap app, is that the app itself gets launched in a web view. All of these native mobile platforms, iOS, Android, Windows, etc., have this API for showing a in-app or a browser window as if it's basically the entire app. And that's kind of the driving technology behind, again, Cordova, PhoneGap, etc. Now in iOS in particular, this class was called UIWebView, which was this Objective-C API that lives under the hood that Cordova calls for you. And there's the one problem with the UI WebView historically is that it has been limited. There's certain performance optimizations, including the newest JavaScript engine that the Apple team maintains, that is packaged in the Safari app. So if you open the Safari app on your iOS device, you're using you get better performance than you get if you're using the UI WebView class within a hybrid app. So that's kind of the historical problem, that basically WebViews or Cordova apps had this arbitrary performance penalty versus the rest of the iOS platform, just the regular browser. And the big news in iOS 8 is that Apple unveiled a new API, WKWebView, which is short for WebKit, that basically brings the WebView on par with the main Safari platform. So far better JavaScript performance, all of these different improvements for various things. But the one big problem with this is that there was a bug in the implementation that did not allow the WKWebView to load local files or to do things through the file protocol, which just happens to be how Cordova apps work. So basically meaning even though this new, faster, awesomer, better API is available for iOS hybrid apps, at the moment it can't be used, which is kind of unfortunate, because it feels like there's this big optimization that's just right there, but we can't actually use it yet. With the Cordova, so the actual bug itself was a WebKit bug, and it has since been patched, but we're waiting for it to get actually packaged into an iOS release. So it didn't make iOS 8.1. So the hope is that whenever iOS 8.2 or 8.1.1 or whatever comes out, it'll be packaged, and Cordova can implement the change in the library, and then AppBuilder can package it up so that we can bring these performance improvements to our users as well.
I have to keep muting myself. One of the beauties of working downtown is that you're downtown, and also that sirens go by like every 15 minutes, and it's funny because I live in a town of like 1,000 people, so I have no idea how the entire town can't constantly be on fire. It's just impossible. It's one of the things that's really interesting to me about this, TJ, is that specifically on the newer like iOS, anything from like iOS 5 or iPhone 5 and beyond, the WebView is so fast, like it just screams. So while I'm excited about getting better JavaScript performance in WKWebView, anything we can do is always a boost. UI WebView on iOS 6 is just ridiculously fast. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And I saw this. We were recently working. We had an app that was running on an HTC One Android phone, and that same app running on the iPhone was, exponentially better by like a factor of 10. It was just crazy.
Yep. Yeah, iOS performance for the WebView, I mean, despite this despite the lack of this optimization, is just night and day better still to this day. Like you said, newer Android phones still can't even compete. And that's we'll have to have that discussion some other day too about Android performance, because that's a whole different topic in and of itself. So that's pretty cool. The one thing about WKWebView is, to kind of move on to the next topic, is that Apple made this decision. They more or less, when they introduced WKWebView, deprecated UI WebView. And so a lot of the new features that were in an iOS Safari didn't make it to UI WebViews. And Apple's basically more or less abandoning it. Which means, so some of the stuff that actually shipped, like there's changes to how the scroll event works in iOS 8 that has changed. There's changes to how the fast click implementation works, and I can explain that momentarily. But the key is that these changes weren't retroactively applied to UI WebView. So if you're running a Cordova app and AppBuilder app today, even though these features are available in iOS 8, you can't use them yet, unfortunately, because they're only in WKWebView, which is still just this close but not available, which is frustrating.
That is super frustrating. On the fast click stuff, you and I were talking about this earlier, and man, this is super confusing. This is one of those things where the web, like, once again, is lovely and yet extremely frustrating at the same time, especially when it comes to touch interactions. Maybe we should sort of summarize that for everybody. That was even hard for me to understand. And just back up a bit, and I'll let you discuss the inner workings of this, TJ, but for everybody who's not familiar with what fast click is, it's something that Kendo UI Mobile does, but it kind of referred to as fast click because the Financial Times sort of pioneered this idea. And the idea being that when you have something on a mobile device and you're looking at a web page, which hybrid apps are, or PhoneGap, Cordova apps are web pages, that what the phone does is when you tap something, it waits 300 milliseconds if you're on a web page before it actually does anything. And the reason why it does this is, TJ?
Well, the historical reason is when Apple pioneered the initial iPhone, they were tasked with basically how do we make the existing web that was designed for like giant desktop browsers look good on this tiny screen. And so they invented this mechanism of double tap to zoom, which basically says if you double tap on the screen, it kind of applies this algorithm to intelligently zoom in on the content. And it was actually quite well done, and it worked really well. And then since it works out so well, basically everybody copied it. So Android copied it, Windows Phone copied it, everybody did, and all of a sudden it became a feature. But the problem with that is that with more responsive sites, basically sites that weren't designed necessarily for a desktop monitor, they were designed to actually look good in a phone screen, that interaction, the double tap to zoom, is completely unnecessary. You don't, it doesn't mean anything. It's useless.
You don't want it. It's a frustrating, it's a conflicting feature, really.
Yeah, and especially so if you're building a hybrid app, you really don't want it because you're absolutely building something that fits in that screen. And so basically the browsers, as part of having this gesture there, the 300 millisecond delay comes from when you tap on the screen, the browser is waiting to see if you're going to tap it again. And basically it says for 300 milliseconds, it's waiting to see if that double tap happens. And then it assumes, like, okay, if I got one tap and then 300 milliseconds have passed and you haven't tapped again, well, that means you must really actually want to click that, so I'm going to trigger that click. So it's super confusing, and there's been a number of things that both browsers and libraries have done to try to work around this. Kendo UI, you mentioned, like what Kendo UI actually does under the hood is when you bind to the click events, so you have to use Kendo UI Mobile's like MVVM data binding layer to get this optimization. But when you listen for the click event, Kendo UI Mobile says, okay, well, I'm actually going to listen to the touch end event instead, because Apple will still fire that event, and trigger your click event on that touch end event rather than the click event, and kind of do some intelligent magic for you to make sure that your app feels responsive, because that's really the problem that you're trying to avoid here, is that if your app is waiting 300 milliseconds to respond to user actions, it feels sluggish. There's been studies that show that somewhere around like 100 milliseconds is what humans can kind of perceive as slow, and if your app is just waiting 300 milliseconds, that just means you're just going to be, users are going to think your app isn't responding to what they're doing.
Right, and then they're going to start hitting buttons more than once, and you're going to start making multiple AJAX calls. So it's definitely a pain. It would be great if there was like a meta tag that they would introduce that's like no tap delay or something. I don't know, just something you could put in there to tell it like, don't do that. Just treat everything on here like it's native.
Yep. If you're building for responsive web, isn't there something that you can put to stop that behavior?
So part of the confusing thing here is that Chrome, Microsoft, and Apple have all come up with different mechanisms for dealing with this. And Chrome, I think, is, in my opinion, the sanest, because if you're using the meta viewport tag and you set the width equals device width part of that meta viewport tag, Chrome 32 and up, so keep in mind that for a hybrid app, that's only like a tiny percentage of your users, unfortunately. Chrome will then not make double tap to zoom isn't a thing if you're using that tag. It's basically you're telling Chrome, I've made this site in a responsive context, so don't even implement double tap to zoom. So there is no delay, which is kind of the sanest approach. Now in IE, you can manipulate this with the touch action CSS property.
Okay.
So basically anything you want to remove the delay on, you can assign the CSS property of touch action none or touch action manipulation. And you can do that kind of globally. So you can say all links and all buttons, like just CSS selector A, comma, button, touch action manipulation. And that'll get rid of the problem for you for the most part. And then in iOS is just the craziest because it's, I don't know, there's some weird heuristics that go into it, and the fact that you even have to describe it as heuristics is complicated enough. But basically in iOS 8, they now intelligently try to figure out whether you're double tapping to zoom, and they do this weird thing where they measure the time between touch start and touch end, and it's kind of complicated. So I think the overall guidance to people is to use a library to kind of get around this, especially just it's a super important thing for the performance of your app. And so, like I said, if you're using KendaUI Mobile, just make sure you're using the MVVM binding so you get this optimization, so data-click or data-bind to bind your events. The fast-click library, even though fast-click kind of refers to the mechanism itself, the fast-click JavaScript library is a good one that you can use with basically any library that kind of does this as well, and it's just like a simple method call, and it internally optimizes this away for you. So it'll listen to the touch end event, and it listens for the touch end event, says, okay, well, let me actually suppress this and trigger a native click event, basically without the delay. So it's kind of confusing, but my advice is more or less to use a library that abstracts this problem away from you, because it's a mess.
Yeah, it is nasty under the covers. Let's talk about, it just occurred to me, we were talking about the AppBuilder Office Hours, and we never really talked about what AppBuilder was. But I think it's a good time, since we need to talk about what the implications for iOS 8 are in AppBuilder. And so AppBuilder is a part of something that we call the Telerik platform. It is a way for you to build cross-platform mobile applications using your favorite IDE. And we provide all of the build services, the whole tool chain, simulation, a companion app to help you test these devices. Because PhoneGap development is great, but it can be very difficult because a lot of times you need to download an iOS SDK and deploy it to a simulator, and then you have to deploy it to the store in order to test it, and it becomes very disjointed. And so AppBuilder from Telerik is just one piece of the platform that allows people to use whatever UI framework they're going to use, sometimes KendaUI, sometimes Ionic, sometimes Angular, Ratchet, whatever, build out their application, and then have it built, test it on their device, debug it with the Chrome tools, which is something that we package up with our own tools, which is a familiar debugging experience, and then finally push it all the way to the App Store, or just distribute it to an inside group of test users. And it's part of an overall package called the Telerik platform, which includes backend or data cloud services, push notifications. We're talking about interactive push notifications, which are coming soon. There's a prototyping tool that we've been working very hard on that's looking really good. There's an app manager that I mentioned, which allows you to distribute your app for testing, similar to TestFlight, similar concept. So the whole goal is to make hybrid development fun to do. Because when it works, it is fun. It's just when it doesn't work and you don't know why, that's when you just want to stop, quit, go back and do it a different way. And so, what are the implications for iOS 8 and AppBuilder?
There really weren't a whole lot. I mean, one of the nice things about using a tool like this is the builds just worked. So the builds get managed in the cloud, and so basically iOS 8 happened, and my builds just kept working. There wasn't a whole lot that you had to do, or really anything you had to do from a user's perspective. The app builder itself is starting to roll out some things that are kind of specific to iOS 8, and so the latest release, which dropped last week, had simulators that were specific for iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus. So basically helps you mock the different dimensions and the different pixel ratio that those devices have. Burke, are you going to show those off? Or?
Yeah, I was just going to show real quick. I've got a quick app up here, and of course, you can. AppBuilder provides a bunch of different ways to code. We give you a browser IDE, but most people, will download the CLI or the Sublime Text package or the Visual Studio integrations. So everything that you see me do is available inside of your favorite IDE. We just provide an experience for you everywhere. But if I'm running it here in the simulator, what's funny is that because I shared just my screen, it's probably not going to share the simulator. But let me stop over here. Let me share a different part of my screen here. I think using these Hangouts tools is the most fun part of this. It's part of a live Hangout. All right. So this is what we call the simulator here, and you can see I'm actually looking at it on an iPhone 6 Plus. So you get all of the dimensions, the pixel ratios are all right for you. You can even switch versions of the OS here. I can go back to the 6, gets a little smaller again, and then I don't know about you guys, but the iPhone 4 is looking about minuscule. I mean, look at the difference between iPhone and iPhone 6 Plus.
Yeah, it's a toy.
It's a lot.
And then, of course, you can test your Android phone, which is also, that looks dainty. I haven't seen an Android phone that's and a Windows phone. So yeah, those are the changes that we made in the simulator. Those are available right now, I think, in all the simulators.
Yep, that was released last Thursday or Friday. That actually went live. So.
And I think there might be some special iOS 8 optimized plugins maybe in the pipeline. I know that the Stripe plugin is looking to hook into Apple Pay, so we'll have to see what comes from our plugin providers. But
yes.
The plugin marketplace is the best.
Which actually serves as a nice segue, because the other thing we wanted to talk about today was a new plugin, the Native Page Transitions plugin. And so just to step back and give a little background here as well, Telerik, we maintain our own what we call verified plugins marketplace, and you can get to it at plugins.telerik.com. And the idea is it's basically a nice Burke. And the idea is that it's basically a series of what looks to be 33 plugins now that are Cordova plugins. So you can use them in any Cordova project. You can use them in any PhoneGap project, drop them in. But they're plugins that we've taken the time to go through, document, make sure that they work on all platforms, to give API documentation. There's screenshots on the bottom. And then there's also a demo app for each of these that you can just either clone an app builder to try them out, or you can just clone yourself and try it with any other Cordova tool you might like using. So pretty cool, worth checking out if you haven't seen it before, plugins.telerik.com. But I wanted to talk specifically about one new one, which is our Native Page Transitions plugin. And this one I think is actually really cool. So Burke's going to bring it up here. But basically what this is an API that lets you tie into the native transitions that are available on your device. So on, let's see, it's flip and slide on iOS and Android, and then there's also drawer animations for iOS as well. So this is pretty cool. I'm actually going to try to bring this up on my device itself, real quick.
While you're doing that, I just wanted to point out here that this is really, really exciting, because one of the places where hybrid apps sometimes break down perf-wise is in these crazy transitions where you're asking the browser to do a whole lot in terms of CSS transforms. And iOS, especially the latest versions, doesn't really have a problem with this. It's pretty good at it. But on Android, even on later versions of Android devices like Greenfield devices, it can still be pretty choppy depending on how much stuff you have in your page. And so by offloading this to the GPU and making this a native transition, what it's actually doing under the covers is, I believe it's actually swapping in an entire new UI WebKit view in the background. It's like moving out one and putting the other one in, and then somehow bringing it all together. We'd have to ask Eddie Verbruggen, who worked on this plugin, but this is really impressive stuff. TJ, were you going to demo this?
Yep, I just got it up and running.
Stop sharing my screen here.
Let me see. So, screen share. This screen here. So hopefully, are you seeing my screen now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So
we are.
what this is my device being mirrored onto my screen using Reflector. So this is my actual iOS device. And this is the little demo app that you can download from that the page that Burke showed earlier. And so I'm on iOS, and you can see that the slide animations, they're actually quite slick. So there's slides, which I'm doing now, and then I can back up and do flips. So these things, pretty cool. And then the last one are drawer animations here, which I'll open and close this drawer here.
Yeah, I think they're a little choppy because of the
Reflector. Oh.
Yeah.
No, because of the Hangout.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if Reflector streamed to my screen, streamed over Hangouts to the internet, and then streamed out to everybody else. Like, I would be shocked if that weren't a little bit laggy.
But yeah, those transitions are completely smooth as you would expect them to be, especially on the latest iOS device.
Yeah, they're buttery smooth.
So how do you use this thing?
And so there's an API for it. So if we go back, do you still have the API docs up on your screen, Burke?
I do. I can share.
I'll stop my screen. But basically, there is a slide, flip, and drawer method on like Windows.plugins.something. I don't remember the exact API. So you scroll up a little bit. Right there, window.plugins.native-transitions.flip. And so if you call that method, it'll do the transitions that I was showing on my device. But where it gets kind of fun is that if you do those just by themselves, they're not actually navigating you anywhere. So you can see your screen flip, but when you come back, you're looking at the same screen. If you pass that plugin a href property, which I think there's an example of that below, what the plugin will actually do is it takes a screenshot of what you're looking at the moment. It'll navigate to that href or to that other view kind of behind the scenes, and then the actual transition will then take place from the screenshot to the newly navigated view, and that's what you're either flipping or sliding, I guess.
That's how that works.
Yeah, that was really neat.
Man, I tell you what, this is exciting. I mean, somebody had asked here if they have to use AppBuilder to use the native page transitions plugin.
Nope. Yeah, it's just completely open to any Cordova plugin. And we even have integrations. So at the moment, we have integrations for Kendo UI Mobile for this thing. And it's still in beta, so it's still something we're kind of working the kinks out of. But basically, it's called the Kendo UI Mobile Adapter. And what it does is it kind of makes the bridge between these APIs. So it makes it so that your transitions in your Kendo UI mobile app are native automatically, so that you don't need to kind of configure it to worry about these APIs yourself. So that's in beta, so you can try it out. I think the link to download it is just further down on this page. And we'd love it if people wrote adapters for this to work for other libraries as well. I know the demo has some jQuery mobile examples, and if someone would like to write an Ionic one as well, that'd be great. It's just a Cordova plugin, so any Cordova app that's running on Android or iOS can potentially tie into this.
Yeah, this is really exciting, especially with the Kendo UI mobile adapter, because when you are testing on the simulator, of course, plugins don't work, right? I mean, plugins are, they're compiled, and so that's not something you can actually test until you get on your device. But what's neat about Kendo UI is that if it will do the transitions with CSS if it can't use the plugin, and then when you actually get the app on your device, it will start using the native transitions. So you have a nice experience of actually going through and having the full testing experience and debugging and be able to, because otherwise what you'd have is your transitions just wouldn't work during debugging, and the only way to find out would be to put it on your device, which isn't by no stretch the end of the world, but just makes it for a very nice experience for developers.
Yep, yeah, this sort of thing I'm excited about, because like anytime that these quick, well, not quick and easy, but pretty seamless changes that you can make to improve the performance of your app, just because I know transitions is a really common pain point for hybrid apps. I know that for whatever reason, mobile browsers and doing these transitions is kind of it's just insane. Like,
Well, if it's like CSS transitions, it's like really just a hog.
Yep. And even like, I know I've had issues before with trying to just show an animated GIF during your transition, and then the browser just arbitrarily pausing it occasionally, and all these other weird little nuances that become a mess to do it. Like the code in KineUI Mobile to actually implement these transitions is kind of crazy. I mean, it's cool what it's able to achieve with the transitions, but the fact that it has to go through all these back doors essentially to get this performance is kind of crazy. And so I think it's pretty awesome that there's basically this tie into the metal, into the core APIs.
Yeah, this is super exciting, especially, again, if I go back to Android, just because I feel like Android just isn't, I don't want to offend I mean, I have an Android device, so I don't want to offend the Android people out there, but for whatever reason, my HTC One just isn't quite there yet, and depending on how many items I have, like especially in a list view, if I've got more than about 15 items, especially if there's images, Android really starts to choke on these big transitions, like flipping the entire page around, or the drawer having a nice, smooth, sliding drawer. The browser just has trouble keeping up. And of course, browsers are getting faster and faster, but the ideal thing to do is to be able to offload this to the only person who can properly handle this, which is the GPU.
Yep. And well, the other thing cool, too, is that it makes your app feel more like a native app, too, because, I mean, it's the actual native thing. So no matter how much you try to replicate the native transitions and such, you're never going to do it with CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. It's just impossible. Like even things like the status bar moves with some of the native transitions, which of course you're never going to be able to achieve with even no matter how fast your web code runs. You just can't do that. It's just not possible. So with things like this, like you kind of avoid that effect where your app feels kind of like a cheap knockoff, and it actually because it is the native thing.
Yeah. And I think, TJ, you and I were talking about this, but we really feel like for hybrid developers that the plugins is, this is where the game is really won in the end. Is for you can rapidly build apps so fast using hybrid, and it takes you like 80% of the way there, 90% sometimes, and then there's this 10% where you're like, that just is not, it's not right, or that doesn't look right, or doesn't feel right, and we feel like plugins are what get you the rest of the way there. And so we're really excited about the plugins marketplace. We're working really hard on that. And all of these plugins are guaranteed to work in AppBuilder and in your AppBuilder applications, and are supported by Telerik as well.
And there are other plugins that will help also with those native touches, like the Toast plugin. That's a really nice feature for your Android device that needs that kind of completely different look for the drop down.
Is that on the plugins marketplace?
Yep.
Yep, it's a verified one.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because Android has the Toast.
Yeah.
Which is that little sort of notification.
Like notification pop-up thingy. Yeah.
On iOS, it does. It just adds the functionality in. I'll go ahead and share this. Yeah, this is another really cool one because in this case, you're actually getting something that the native framework on iOS doesn't offer you, I don't believe. I think you have to implement this. Right here. Over in the left-hand corner here. Well, hold on, I think I'm presenting.
Okay, yep, I see it.
Yeah, right there. Like, that's pretty hot. That's a whole lot of Objective-C that you didn't have to write.
Yeah, it's nice. And also it's kind of a good starter plugin. You can sort of just get your feet wet with plugins using this one. I think it would be a good starter.
You're probably right, yeah, really simple. I love notifications. I don't know what it is about notifications, but every time I see like a new jQuery notification plugin or like the material design stuff, I get super excited. Notifications. I want to show somebody a notification.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, in general, just to build off what Burke said, the appeal of hybrid has always been you get to write with web stuff, you get up and going really quickly. Like you'll get a functional app that just makes off the ground quickly. Multiple platforms don't have to dig into native code. But these type things will help get you the last mile, or when you run into those performance issues, you have an option now. So if you're trying to do transitions and they were choppy or you weren't able to optimize them, then this plugin gives you a path that gives you that ultimate performance boost, and you don't have to write the plugin yourself, which is always nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan is asking whether or not what is AppBuilder free or is it a commercial product?
So AppBuilder is a commercial product, but everybody gets a free 30-day trial to try it out. Probably the best place to start, you can go to Telerik.com/AppBuilder. You can also go to Telerik.com/platform, as AppBuilder is part of the Telerik platform. It'll both kind of funnel you into the same experience getting started with the Telerik platform. So free for 30 days, and then after that, it's a paid product, and the pricing should be, if you go to Telerik.com/platform, you can get some more information on the pricing.
We got another question here from Rabu, wants to know if he can use AppBuilder with Eclipse, TJ. I don't know. I feel sorry for Rabu. Yeah, I hope I'm saying his name right.
Yeah.
AppBuilder with Eclipse, or should we just get Rabu to a support group for users?
So you can use the AppBuilder CLI.
Yeah.
What's a CLI?
What is a CLI? A command line interface. So basically, download npm install AppBuilder, npm install -g AppBuilder, and then you can kind of wire up the AppBuilder commands into whatever environment you want to use. Node runs everywhere, runs on Windows, runs on Linux even. So, and actually, so AppBuilder has Sublime Text and Visual Studio integrations, and the Sublime Text one is actually more or less a thin wrapper around the CLI. It just gives you some convenience commands that you can use with AppBuilder. And that's something that you could tie into an extendable IDE such as Eclipse. So there's nothing to stop you from writing an Eclipse plugin that uses the AppBuilder CLI. And we would love if somebody out there listening to this today could produce that integration, because I can't speak for Burke and Jen, but I have no experience building Eclipse plugins, so that's not something that's close to the top of my to-do list. But if you are watching and you are the type of person that lives and dies Eclipse plugins, there's an opportunity for an AppBuilder one out there.
We're getting the always popular Windows Phone question. Do these things work on Windows Phone?
So AppBuilder supports Windows Phone fully. Some of the plugins each individually mention platform support, and the vast majority of them are Android, iOS, and Windows Phone. I think we should mention specifically that the native transitions one is not Windows Phone compliant at the moment. I know that's something that we're working on addressing. I'm not as familiar with Windows Phone and what the native transitions are even like, so I'm not sure if it's more of a technical restriction or what the holdback on that specifically is, but it's something that falls back quite nicely, because you could use, say, your framework's transitions you're already using, the CSS transitions one in KendoUI Mobile, and it'll fall back nicely where the plugin isn't available. So, but in general, with any of the Cordova plugins, just if you check the site, it should list out pretty well what's supported. So check that out.
All right, I think this is also a good time to plug our upcoming KendoUI release. We got new mobile stuff. We should point out that KendoUI Mobile is part of KendoUI Core, which is completely open source and free. You can go to github.com/telerik/kendo-ui-core, and you can grab KendoUI Mobile. We're having a webinar coming up here on and now I don't know the exact dates.
So probably the best, if you go to telerik.com/webinars, and the date is actually November 20th, it looks like. But if you go to telerik.com/webinars, you can get a link to that if you want to learn more about KendoUI and the new release.
Awesome. And we've got another question here from Steve. He says he's been using AppBuilder for a bit. He feels like the code assist is lacking. Is this going to be improved at all? I'm not sure if Steve, I assume Steve's talking about the code assist inside of the Mist, which is what we call the browser client.
Like code completion type thing?
Code completion. There's Emmet support. I think that the browsers have come a long way. Mist is a great client. We use what's the name of that? CodeMirror is what we use to do the coding. But the best code completion experience is always going to be in your own IDE.
Yeah, I was
So
gonna
always
say Sublime.
yeah, get that Visual Studio plugin, get that Sublime Text plugin, code in your favorite IDE because the browser is just never going to be able to do what your IDE can do.
Yeah, and that being said, I mean, we are constantly trying to improve the browser experience. So there is things like Emmet support that was added recently, and there is some sort of some code completion that's involved, but it's absolutely lacking. You're right. So that is good feedback. That is something that we can try to do what we can. But like Burke said, for the best experience, check out the AppBuilder CLI and try using your IDE of choice, your native IDE of choice, if that's a show-stopping problem for you.
Yeah. It will speed up your development using the CLI because you can, use your simulator locally and you just like slam. You can see that app really, really quickly. I like it.
Steve, I think if you want to drop into the comments and just sort of tell us exactly, if there's certain things you're looking for, we can get that back over to the engineering team who's always looking for us to tell them what doesn't work or what they can do better. There's nothing they enjoy more than us to tell them.
Yes.
I love the browser client, and specifically in AppBuilder, for when I don't have time to fire everything up and I just need to make some quick tweak, and then I can just bring it up, go in, change it, push it to GitHub, and then get back out again. Like for that, it's absolutely brilliant.
Yep, I agree. And so if anybody watching isn't aware, you can now share your code between all of the AppBuilder clients seamlessly.
Uh-oh, TJ.
No, TJ.
Change your code, switch back over to the browser, change your code, go back to Sublime Text, and integrate, work across all the different repos, or all the different platforms. So.
Yeah, that was a huge feature for me. Really nice. It's always surprising me how I'm like, I have a PC and I have a Mac, and I'm just, depending on the day, I'm on either one. I don't know if a lot of people are like that, but or switching at least between parallels, and like, I don't want to have to go back to a specific place to develop. Yeah, I just want to be able to. I just want to be able to work, man. I just want to be able to code, and AppBuilder is really nice about providing that everywhere.
Definitely.
Let's see. David has asked. Said it looks like Microsoft's VS Hybrid app development plugin is going to support step-by-step debugging in the emulator. Will the VS plugin for AppBuilder do the same thing, or does it do it already?
So it does not do it already. That is actually pretty good feedback. I'd have to get back with you on the specifics of whether that's on the roadmap or not. I actually just saw a demo of that, and I do have to say that's a really slick feature, the kind of inline debugging. And I think at the moment they have it working for Android, but not for iOS quite yet. But I'd have to check specifically on that and get back with you.
That's a great question, though. But you can be sure that if it would make your Visual Studio experience better, then we'll get that feedback back to the product team. And I can see how, as a Visual Studio developer, it would be nice to be able to get that step-by-step debugging in the IDE. I'm sort of used to using the Chrome DevTools, but I remember when I did a fair amount of .NET development, I was really good with those DevTools, and I wanted to use the Visual Studio ones, not some other ones.
Yeah, and the one restriction at the moment is really Windows Phone, because as long as you're using the device's native tools, you can do remote debugging with Safari, desktop Safari for your iOS Safari app, and with desktop Chrome for your Android app. And so those two platforms have a really good story, and you can do step-by-step JavaScript debugging from those browsers. Kind of the one oddball out is Windows Phone, in that the debugging experience, like there is no native, like you can't fire up desktop IE and hit your Windows Phone hybrid app. There's no magic that makes that happen currently. So I don't know. Time will tell. That's the one thing for me that always gets me. Windows Phone debugging is a mess.
I actually think it'd be a great hangout in the future to just do like a debug smackdown. Like, how do you do it on this, that, the other platform? And what if you're using CLI? What if you're using the in-browser experience? Because for me, it gets a little confusing.
Yeah, that would be really good, because you can use App Builder Simulator. You can use the iOS. If you're on a Mac, you can use the Xcode emulator. I think it's an
Yeah,
emulator.
there's a console in there somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, then you can deploy it to your device and you can remote inspect it, or you can do the same thing through Graphite, which is a Windows client. I mean, there's 1,000 different ways to do it.
Yeah, there's stuff in the Windows client that may address this. I'm not as familiar. There's so many options that it gets confusing even to us.
Sure. And I think that, for those of us that, have been working on this on App Builder and the platform for a while, that we're really dedicated to providing the best development experience possible for hybrid apps. And so we want to get it all back into one central place so that you never have to leave Visual Studio until you're ready to go publish to the App Store and receive $20 billion in venture capital. I mean, that's
Yeah, I believe that's our new tagline.
yeah, that is. App Builder, guaranteed $20 billion in venture capital.
So I think we're running low on time. We've already ran quite a bit over. So if you have any other questions, feel free to leave them on the events page. You can feel free to reach out at us directly. So my name's TJ VanToll. I'm TJ. You can email me at tj.vantoll@telerik.com, or I'm at TJ VanToll on Twitter. So feel free to reach out with any questions you may have. Also, this isn't the only AppBuilder Office Hours we're going to be doing. So look for us in the future with new and fun topics, and bring your questions there as well. So, Burke, Jen, anything else you want to add?
If you're building any fabulous and fascinating apps with any of the Telerik products, please ping me. I'm looking for an app to feature, and I will make it worth your while. So you can email me at jen.looper, Looper, @telerik.com, or follow me on Twitter, jen.looper.
Yep, and I'm Burke Holland. You can get me at burke.holland@telerik.com or on Twitter at Burke Holland. And again, we welcome your questions, your feedback, anything that we can do for you. That's what our job is. That's what we get paid to do. So please don't hesitate to ask. And thanks so much for joining us today. This was awesome. It's a lot of fun. I can't wait to do it again.
Yep. All right.
Thank you.
See you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.